Listen closely. What I am about to reveal may disturb those who have built their entire identity upon their wounds. There exists a profound transformation that occurs when an empath, one who has spent their entire existence absorbing the emotional debris of others, finally achieves what I term complete psychological integration. And I must warn you, this healing does not look the way you imagine it. It does not result in the compassionate, endlessly available soul that the world expects you to become. No. What emerges is something far more paradoxical, far more powerful, and infinitely more threatening to those who have grown comfortable feeding upon your unprotected energy. Perhaps you are watching this right now because something within you has shifted. Perhaps you have noticed that the emotional storms of others no longer pull you into their undertow. Perhaps you have felt a strange new boundary forming inside your chest, a golden perimeter that holds firm even when tears are shed, even when anger is projected, even when guilt is weaponized against you. If this describes your recent experience, then you are not losing your empathy. You are arriving at what I call sovereign sensitivity, the final stage of the empath's individuation process. Let me be direct with you. For decades, I have observed a particular pattern in my analytical work. There are individuals born with what might be called energetic porousness, a nervous system calibrated to frequencies that most humans cannot detect. You know who you are. You are the child who cried when your mother was sad even though she smiled. You are the friend who feels the tension in a room the moment you enter it. You are the lover who absorbed your partner's depression until it became indistinguishable from your own. This is not metaphor, this is psychic reality. But here is what most empaths do not realize, and here is what the self-help industry will never tell you. Your empathy in its unhealed state was not a gift. It was a wound masquerading as a superpower. It was an absence of boundaries, misinterpreted as an abundance of love. The universe, or what I prefer to call the self-regulating psyche, will not allow this distortion to continue indefinitely. And so it initiates a process, a brutal, unmistakable process that forces the empath toward complete healing. And when this healing completes, 5 undeniable manifestations occur. Not some, not most, all 5. And if you are experiencing even 3 of these signs, I can tell you with absolute certainty that you are further along this path than you realize. When an empath heals completely, the first thing that dies is the compulsive need to fix, save, or rescue others from their own psychological processes. And let me be clear, this is experienced as a death. It feels like something precious inside you has gone cold. You will find yourself sitting across from someone you love, someone who is in genuine pain, and you will feel nothing, not apathy, not cruelty, but a profound, unsettling neutrality. I call this the withdrawal of projection. For years, you were not actually helping people. You were unconsciously trying to heal your own childhood wounds by proxy. Every person you rescued was a symbolic representation of the younger you who needed rescuing but never received it. The universe understands this pattern, and so it removes your investment in others' suffering, not to make you heartless, but to force you to finally turn inward and do the work you have been avoiding through your fixation on external salvation. Here is what this looks like in practical terms. Someone calls you at midnight with the same crisis they have had every month for the past 3 years. In your unhealed state, you would answer immediately, your heart racing with the familiar cocktail of purpose and anxiety. But now you see the call, you feel a faint recognition, and you silence your phone. You go back to sleep. And here is the revelation that will shock you. They survive anyway. They always do. Because your compulsive caretaking was never what kept them alive. It was what kept you distracted from your own unlived life. The healed empath understands a truth that sounds cruel but is actually the highest form of love. Every soul has its own journey, and your interference, no matter how well-intentioned, is often an act of spiritual colonialism. You are attempting to rob them of the very struggle that would force their own individuation. When you step back, you give them the greatest gift possible, the opportunity to discover their own strength. But we are just beginning. The second sign that an empath has healed completely is far more disquieting, for it reveals just how much of your previous empathy was actually unconscious enmeshment. When the healing completes, you develop what I term energetic discernment, the ability to distinguish between genuine emotion and manufactured manipulation. And once you develop this capacity, you cannot unsee it. You begin to notice that approximately 70% of the emotional displays in your life are not authentic expressions of feeling, but rather strategic performances designed to extract specific responses from you. Let me paint you a picture. Your mother calls. Within 30 seconds, her voice takes on a particular tremor. In your unhealed state, this tremor would activate immediate guilt, immediate action. But now, something has changed. You hear the tremor, and simultaneously you perceive the mechanism behind it. You understand with crystalline clarity that this is not genuine sadness. This is a learned behavioral pattern, probably inherited from her own mother, designed to ensure that you remain emotionally tethered to her needs. And here is what may shock you. This recognition does not make you angry, it makes you free. The healed empath no longer resonates with emotional manipulation because they have integrated their shadow. They have acknowledged their own capacity for manipulation, their own history of using emotional displays to control outcomes. And in that acknowledgement, the spell breaks. You see manipulation everywhere now, not because you have become paranoid, but because you have become conscious. The colleague who sighs heavily until you ask what is wrong, the friend who threatens self-harm when you establish boundaries, the partner who cries precisely when you are about to address their behavior. You see it, you name it, and you do not engage. This is what I call the sovereignty of attention. You become the gatekeeper of your own emotional energy, and those who have grown accustomed to feeding upon your unprotected empathy will experience your healing as a form of abandonment. They will accuse you of changing, of becoming cold, of no longer being the person they knew. And they are correct. You are no longer the person they knew, because the person they knew was fragmented, wounded, and available for exploitation. The person you have become is whole, and wholeness, paradoxically, looks like cruelty to those who benefited from your brokenness. Here is a phenomenon that I have documented in case after case. When an empath heals completely, they experience a dramatic return of physical vitality. Chronic fatigue begins to lift, mysterious illnesses start to resolve. Energy that was once drained by invisible forces suddenly becomes available for your own creative pursuits, your own pleasure, your own existence. This is not coincidence, this is not placebo, this is the reclamation of what I term loaned consciousness. For years, perhaps decades, you were unconsciously channeling your life force into the psychic maintenance of other people's emotional systems. Every time you absorbed someone's anger to keep the peace, you gave away a piece of your vitality. Every time you carried someone's depression because they could not hold it themselves, you depleted your own reserves. The body keeps an exact accounting of this exchange, and the body, in its wisdom, will eventually force a reckoning. The healed empath wakes up one morning and realizes they have not thought about their mother's problems in 3 days. They have not checked at their phone compulsively to see if their friend is in crisis. They have not scanned every room they enter for signs of emotional distress. And in the absence of this constant monitoring, something extraordinary occurs. They remember what it feels like to simply exist for themselves. You begin to pursue things for no reason other than that they bring you joy. You paint, you dance, you sit in silence without feeling guilty for not being productive. You experience pleasure without immediately thinking about who needs you. This is not selfishness, this is the restoration of the self, and the self, once restored, becomes a genuine source of contribution to the world, not through martyrdom, but through overflow. I must tell you something that may sound harsh. Your exhaustion was never just about your sensitivity, it was about your refusal to establish what I call the ethical boundary. You convinced yourself that love meant unlimited availability, but this is a distortion. True love, mature, individuated love, requires the capacity to say no. It requires the willingness to let others experience the consequences of their own choices, and it requires you to value your own life force enough to stop giving it away to people who have no intention of doing their own psychological work. The fourth sign is perhaps the most alienating, and yet it is utterly undeniable. When an empath completes their healing, they develop an almost physical aversion to unconscious people. Not dislike, not judgment, but a bodily response that I can only describe as repulsion, a visceral knowing that proximity to certain individuals will undo the integration you have worked so hard to achieve. You will be at a gathering, perhaps a family event or a social obligation, and you will feel it, the unmistakable urge to leave. Not because you are anxious, not because you are tired, but because your entire system is signaling danger. You are in the presence of people who are still operating from their wounds, still projecting their shadows, still demanding that you participate in unconscious patterns, and your healed psyche will not allow it. This is what I call protective discernment. The fully healed empath understands that not all connection is beneficial. They understand that some relationships exist only to keep you small, to keep you wounded, to keep you available for roles that no longer serve your individuation. And so they do something that the old, unhealed version of themselves could never do. They leave. They exit conversations mid-sentence. They stop attending events that drain them. They allow friendships to naturally dissolve without the guilt-ridden attempts to revive them. Here is what you must understand. The people who are most threatened by your healing are not your enemies. They are the ones who loved your wounds because your wounds gave them permission to remain wounded. Your mother who bonded with you over shared victimhood, your friend who needed you to be struggling so she would not feel alone in her struggle, your partner who required you to be emotionally dependent so he could feel needed. When you heal, you break an invisible contract, and the other party will not celebrate your liberation. They will mourn the loss of the dynamic that gave their life meaning. The healed empath does not try to bring unconscious people with them. They do not evangelize their process. They do not attempt to wake up those who are still sleeping. They simply withdraw, and in that withdrawal, they create space for conscious relationships to emerge, relationships based not on mutual wounding, but on mutual wholeness. And now we arrive at the final manifestation, the one that represents complete healing. When an empath heals fully, they experience a radical shift in their understanding of love itself. Boundaries, which once felt like acts of cruelty or abandonment, are now recognized as the highest form of love, both for yourself and for others. Let me be precise about what I mean. In your unhealed state, you confused love with fusion. You believed that to love someone meant to merge with their pain, to take on their burdens, to lose yourself in service to their needs. This is not love. This is what I call unconscious codependency. It is a reenactment of childhood attachment wounds where your value was determined by your usefulness to others. But the healed empath discovers something extraordinary. When you establish firm, clear, non-negotiable boundaries, you do not lose connection. You create the space for authentic connection to occur. You stop being a dumping ground and become a mirror. You stop absorbing and start reflecting. And in that reflection, people are forced to see themselves, to take responsibility for their own emotional states, to develop their own capacity for self-regulation, to grow up. I will give you a concrete example. Your sibling calls you once again to complain about their marriage. For years, you listened, you empathized, you gave advice. Nothing changed. But now, healed, you say, I love you and I can no longer participate in these conversations. I support you in finding a therapist who can help you decide what you truly want. There will be silence, there may be anger, there may be accusations that you no longer care. But here is the truth, you care more now than you ever did, because you are no longer enabling their stagnation, you are forcing them toward their own growth, and that is love, uncomfortable, challenging, boundary-enforcing love. The fully healed empath understands that every time you rescue someone from a lesson they need to learn, you commit an act of violence against their soul's evolution. And you also commit an act of violence against your own, for you are teaching yourself that your needs do not matter, that your energy is not precious, that your life can be interrupted at any moment by someone else's refusal to take responsibility for their own healing. Boundaries then become a spiritual practice. Not a wall to keep people out, but a sacred perimeter that protects the space where your authentic self can finally breathe, expand, and exist without. Apology. And here, at last, is the paradox that contains the entire truth. When an empath heals completely, they do not become less sensitive. They become more discerning. They do not lose their capacity to feel. They lose their compulsion to fix. They do not abandon others. They reclaim themselves. The world will not celebrate this transformation. The world needs empaths to remain wounded, available, self-sacrificing. The world has built entire systems, families, workplaces, religious institutions, upon the labor of those who cannot say no. And when you heal, you threaten those systems simply by existing as a whole person who will no longer participate in unconscious exchanges. I have observed that the healed empath often goes through a period of profound loneliness. The old relationships fall away. The roles you once played are no longer available to you. You exist in a strange liminal space where you are too conscious for your old life, but not yet connected to the people who will appreciate your new one. This is necessary. This is the desert. This is what mystics have always called the dark night of the soul, the space between who you were and who you are becoming. But I promise you this, on the other side of this loneliness is a life beyond what your wounded self could have imagined. You will find relationships based on reciprocity, not rescue. You will find work that energizes rather than depletes you. You will find pleasure in your own company. You will find that you no longer need external validation because you have finally, at long last, validated yourself. And so I leave you with this. Are you willing to complete your healing, even if it means disappointing everyone who benefited from your brokenness? Are you willing to become whole, even if wholeness looks like coldness to those who loved your warmth? Are you willing to reclaim your life force, even if it means you are no longer available to maintain the emotional equilibrium of your entire family system? These are not rhetorical questions. These are the questions that will determine whether you remain a wounded empath or become what I call a sovereign sensitive, someone who feels everything but is destroyed by nothing, someone who loves deeply but is no longer imprisoned by love, someone who gives generously but never at the expense of their own soul. The path of complete healing is not the path of becoming a better version of the person everyone expects you to be. It is the path of becoming unrecognizable to everyone except yourself. And that ultimately is the only homecoming that matters. The choice, as always, is yours.